Okay, your original assignment was to analyze all the chords, all the figured bass along with the chords, the cadences, and then the non-chord tones. And if we found a chord that had accidentals in it, i.e. was chromatic, that we should just highlight it and go around it, and then in this video I would try and explain it as well. It's a skill actually to isolate things that you're not sure of and not let that derail you. Nice thing about Amazing Grace written in this kind of style is that it's chorale style, meaning that pretty much you're going to get vertical stacks of chords. Occasionally you have some notes that move as well, and this allows us to get some practice on identifying our non-chord tones. I'm just highlighting stacks where I see accidentals right here and down at the bottom. Did I miss any in between? I don't think so. Happily, the other side of this, which has verses 4, 5, and 6, is the same as that. So you only have to analyze the one side. And then when you're done, you draw a diagram. So I'm going to go through this, explain the chromatic chords as we come along to them, and sort of give you not just the answers, but follow along so you get a workflow of how to do this. If you're finding difficulties with this, keeping up or something, it could be because you don't have something well memorized, like maybe you're not sure about cadential formulas really well yet, or when we do non-chord tones, you don't have the definitions firmly entrenched in your sort of like short-term memory. Similarly, if you just have a problem reading bass clef or something like that, or spelling your chords, or thinking in scales, that's going to cause you problems. All of these things you could say like, oh, that's bad, or this is not good, but it's actually really useful. Nobody knows everything, and so what we want to do is give you context so you can say, okay, push comes to shove, I'll get the most bang for my buck in terms of improvement if I fix this thing or that thing. So it's a good assessment tool. Okay, this is in the key of F major, and most people are familiar with oops, here I'm looking backwards. I'm actually not looking at the piano, right? And then last line, shove it up there, right? Okay. Oh, I found one more chord that has accidentals in it. It's right there. Okay, so identified the key, sung through or played through the melody, so we're familiar with how the phrases go, and at the end of every phrase we're looking for cadences. You might think, why don't you just dash on and do the chords, and that's because cadences confirm phrase lengths, and that confirms key. And so although I said we're in F major, you still want to look at the cadences to confirm that. Cadences are almost universally going to be 1s or 5 chords, so you can think ahead and start working on that. So for instance, here we have a 1 chord. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Okay. There's an argument to be made that this isn't a cadence and that it's just part way through, but I think we're going to think of this as a phrase. Okay, at least we can look at it both ways if it's a phrase. If it starts to work out that it's just not making sense, then we can say no, it's not, and then we're just looking at 2 phrases. But it feels long enough, and we won't overthink it. You know, 1 line per phrase maybe. This is an F chord right here, and this is a B flat chord right there, and that would be a plagal cadence. Yeah, so I can go back here and I can go like, look, this is a B flat chord, so that's my 4. It's in root position, and then this is a 1 chord right there. It's also in root position. There are no notes in here that are not B flat, D, or F, and there are no notes in here that are not FAC, no non-chord tones. We'll talk about that later, but now let's just go from the beginning. And also, for right now, we'll call this a plagal cadence. unless we decide that it's not a cadence, that it's too short. Single note, it says that it's like the 5 chord, right? Boom, 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 right? But not enough information. We'll just start right here. There's an F chord. It's a 1 chord, right? F-A-C. There's also an F chord. It's just been stretched out. And although there's activity, these are all F, F, C, A, F, A. It's all 1 chord, right? So we don't really need to do more. Same thing here. Still a 1 chord right here. Since it's a new measure, I'm just going to put that on there like that. Let's just talk about this right now. It's a common thing. It's more like a second-year thing, but we see this all the time. And if we look at the notes of this chord right here, this is an A, a G, E flat, and a G, right? And so A, G, and E flat. And what we have here is, if you want to take it on its own, it's an A, C, E flat, G with the C missing. Or if you feel like the F is, being heard right here, coming through and not changed by the G, then you could think of it as an incomplete F. But I think of this, the G is canceling out the F here and the F is not in the bass. So incomplete chord, A, C, E flat, G, that feels like a diminished triad with a minor 7. So this is an A half diminished 7, and we know that that would be a 7 chord in a major key, yeah? 2 chord in minor, but this doesn't feel minor. And what's happened here is to give the B flat chord, this is the second-year explanation, to give the B flat chord that's coming up more emphasis or importance and push towards it from the F chord, we have put a 7 of the 5. In other words, if we think in the key of B flat, A half diminished is a 7 chord. And so we label this as 7, and the A is in the bass, so it's in root position of the 4 chord, which is B flat. Temporarily says, well, what if B flat was home, and then brings a 7 over to it. Okay? No non-chord tones so far. All right. Let's look over here and keep going. If we go to the end of this, right? Like me, bum bum, right? This is a 5 chord right here. It's a C chord, right? And there's some things that push through, and then we just get C chord in first inversion again. So this is 5, and this is 5 in first inversion right there. And that sounds like a half cadence to me, like that. Yeah? Okay. And we can look around here and just make sure that we haven't changed the key. You could say, well, there's a G, B, D, F, A. That feels like 7 of 5. It's doing the same thing here, like that. Okay? So, let's talk about this. First off, we're still in the key of F. This is the F chord, so I'm a 1. This is not part of the F chord. It passes through. So that'd be a passing tone right there. Enter by step, lead by step in the same direction. Here's a D, F, A, C. That would be a D minor chord, D minor 7, which is going to be a 6 minor 7 in this key, right? And that continues to be a D minor 7, D, D, F, A, C. So it just goes all the way through. Now, here is a strange chord. B with a natural D, F, A. That is a B half diminished 7. It's in first inversion, but that's fine. The point here is that, again, it's not part of the key of F. It makes it sound like we're going to the key of, if this is a 7 chord, right, because it's half diminished 7, of C, right? So we would call this a 7 half diminished, and now because the third's in the bass, 6, 5 of 5. Depends on how you want to hear this note right here. You could think of that as a neighbor tone, if you'd like. Or you can think that it squishes down to a G7, G, B, D, F, and that this is the non-chord tone. And that's a judgment call. If you hear this, right, and this, right, do you hear the G as the chord tone, or do you hear these as non-chord tones, right? If you hear the G as the resolution, and this is a step out, then this is a appoggiatura, and this is an escape tone, which is a novel idea. But I think from a time point of view, we sit on this for such a long time, we just come to here briefly and go out, that I'm just gonna call it all that, keep it simple, and this is just a neighbor tone. Unless you have a reason for it, simplest is the best way to think of it, okay? All right, you could say, did we modulate? I think the question is what happens next, and since we don't stay in the key of C afterwards, and the B flat comes back right here, right? Then, yeah, I don't think so, right? This natural here is just to remind us that we're not doing that anymore. This B flat here, which is part of the key signature, they're both part of the key signature, is to remind us that we're not doing that anymore. But it's actually just a chord in the key after you get rid of the cautionary accidentals. And the C becomes a C7, which is a 5-7 in F. So I think this is just not long enough to say we've changed key. It does push us away, but it doesn't stay there long enough. We come right back to the key of F with 5-7. Let's just take a look over here at this. This is F, A, C. It's my F chord again, so this is going to be a 1 chord. And if you look here, it sounds very similar to the beginning. And, you know, it is in many ways just like the beginning. This is a 4 chord, right? And if we look here, this is still a 4 chord. And then we get a B flat, G, and a D. So now you have to make a decision, is that making a different chord, a G minor chord? And I don't think so, because there's no reason to go to a 2 chord, G minor, and then to a 1 when 4 is more likely the candidate. That just is a passing note right there. Again, step in, step out, right? This is another plagal cadence right there. And now we can go back and analyze the rest of this. So F chord, right? F, F. All these are part of the F chord, no non-chord tones. 5 likes to go to there. Still an F chord, right there. This is still an F chord, F, A, C, but the A is in the bass, so it's a 1-6. Some books, since we're already in a 1 chord, will just put a 6 and not put that there, and that's fine. Okay, and then this last, was blind, but now I see. We're ending the piece. I expect this to be an authentic cadence right here, right? Let's just check this out right here. We have an F, A, C, F. This is transitory in the middle, right? And this B flat that showed up here is actually in the key. It's just telling us not to worry about that anymore, right? So it's a reminder, but it's in the key. So this is the 5, 7, right? This is the C, E, G, B flat, right? And this is a 1 chord F right there. This will be a neighbor tone, and this will be a neighbor tone. And a funny thing about that, if you on a root position 1 chord and your 3rd and your 5th go up, you actually get this 4, 6, 4 right there, and we call that a neighbor chord actually, because the notes that are neighbor tones make a neighbor chord right there. We put it in parentheses because it's just an embellishment of the 1 chord in this case, and comes back real quick. Okay, and then here, this is a C, C, F, A. It's an F chord, but it's also in second inversion like this. And when we find that at a cadence with a 5 chord, we call this a tonic 6-4, cadential tonic 6-4. In other words, this is just embellishing parts of the 5 chord, right? And so the whole thing is thought of as a dominant chord right there. Okay. Going back to here, This is a C chord right here, first inversion, so that's a 5-6. But it doesn't go to a 1 chord, it goes to a D, D, F, A. It goes to a 6. It's not a cadence, so we're not going to call it a deceptive cadence, but it is a deceptive progression. 5 going to 6, right? And then here we have this thing again. B natural, D, F, A. This is a B half diminished 7. It's the G chord, or sorry, B is the 7 of the C chord coming up. So it's doing the same thing that it did up here. It's pushing us, you know, with a little more push to the chord coming up. It's the 7 of the 5. Remember, this whole thing is considered a 5 chord, even though it's a 1, 6, 4 there. And so this will be a 7 diminished. This is the half diminished, sorry, the 6, 5 of 5. And then it comes up like that. Okay, and this is a perfect authentic cadence. If you look, root position 5 chord, root position 1 chord, root of the 1 chord in the top as well. That's your answers right there. Now, if we're going to draw this, we have 4 phrases. Okay, first phrase is pickup doesn't count. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Fourth measure, and we're in the key of F, and we have a plagal cadence right there. And then we have measure 8. We have a half cadence there. And then measure 12, we have another plagal cadence. And measure 16, we have a perfect authentic cadence. Okay? And if we had to, we should label the tops with sort of like, what are they? The first thing we'll call A. Amazing grace, da-da-da-dum. Bum bum ba da dum ba da dum. That's pretty similar. The difference is the ending, but I'm just going to call that A prime, right? Bum bum ba da da dum. That's different. Ba dum ba da da dum, right? Ba dum ba da dum bum bum. It's got the same beginning as this right there. I'm going to call it A2 right there, like that. Now, is this a period structure or something? That's the last question. And remember, period structures are, it's not a sentence, first off. It doesn't have like a X and an X prime and then a Y. So is it a period structure? Remember, period structures have questions. We call this the antecedent, and answer areas called the consequent. And the simplest ones are just look 2 phrases and you go, is this, you know, are they linked together by a less conclusive and a more conclusive cadence? And the answer is no, they're not. This here is less conclusive than a plagal cadence. This ends on a 1 chord, this ends on a 5. Clearly needs to keep going on, right? So not a period right there, okay? But this is one of those tricky ones where if you think about it, this is the end of the question right there. So this is my question. Means that this is not an important cadence. This is the end of the question. We look at that cadence right there. Bum bum ba da da dum, bum bum ba da da dum. Not important internal. Bum bum ba da dum, bum bum. And this is my answer right there. So it is a period because this is less conclusive than that. It's just complicated because it's so big. It's got 2 phrases and 2 phrases. And a period with 2 phrases in the question and 2 phrases in the antecedent is called a double period. And then we can go a little further. We can say, well, are they the same length? Yes, they're roughly the same length. So this is going to be symmetrical. Symmetrical like that, I think. Forgive me if it's got 1 M, right? And then you have to say, is it parallel or contrasting? And we look at the beginnings of the question and the answer and say, are they similar? And they're not. So this would be contrasting, right? So we would call this a contrasting symmetrical double period because the beginnings of the 2 sections are different enough from each other that you don't think they're the same or very similar. Symmetrical because the lengths of the question and the answer are the same length. And double period because the question has 2 phrases in it and the answer has 2 phrases in it. And hopefully that gets you to a place where now you understand both the harmony. You even have a glimpse into second year with these 7 ofs. right, when you see that, and how we can, use knowledge of scales or keys, chords and figured bass, cadences to understand what's going on, and then non-chord tones for things that are not part of the actual chord structure that give shape and tension and release to the lines. Yeah, and then diagrams like this, right? This global diagram is actually a great way to summarize this without getting too deep into the details. And then if you want, you can start adding things like this has the, like the 7 of 4 in there going to 4, right? And you could say like this has the 7 of, 6, 5 of 5 going to the 5. Little things to help you remember bits and pieces more than that. Anything else you want, you can also label in here. This helps us start to summarize and therefore memorize pieces of music or understand them on a global level rather than what's this chord,